Welcome everyone to Rising Out of the Chrysalis Stories That Inspire with Marissa Grace, where we share life stories of struggle and triumph, not only of my own life experiences, but also through the experiences of my own guests, as a way to help you have breakthroughs and find hope in your own life. Welcome everyone to our show. I would like to introduce our wonderful guest, Josie Torres. Josie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Now, Josie, you have a very interesting story, and I've had a lot of guests on the show, but yours kind of takes it, the cake off the top, on the top of the cake. So I want you to go back and kind of go back to early childhood and give us like a brief preview of what your childhood early on was like and how you grew up and the circumstances that you were in.
Right. Thank you. So I don't feel like I'm winning by being one of the most interesting, by the way, but because it was so traumatic, right? And it was like one thing after another. And it didn't really stop until my 20s, actually. And it started really in the 80s when the crack was introduced to the lower income communities and it was bombarded. My family, as well as many others in our community, was infested with drugs. I mean, I would go to school and I would see people falling on the ground and drug dealers selling drugs and people shooting up in the playgrounds. We couldn't even play in the playgrounds. Like there was needles everywhere. So it was that. And my mom was unable to take care of us because she was addicted to drugs. But at one point, my grandmother died. She had custody of us and she had a blood transfusion. She was given AIDS. And then after that, we went with my aunt who gave us to my mother. And my mother was on drugs. We lived in a shelter in a hotel. And my sister's father was also, so it was my sister, myself, my brother, my mom, and my sister's father. And we were all staying in this hotel room. And it had like a little bathroom, a little kitchen area. And that is where my mom left us for a few days with him. And that's where the sexual abuse began. And it started out with him just like putting needles in the bed. So every time I would move or shift in the bed, I would feel poked. And then he started throwing things at me at night. One time it was a boot and I had a black eye. Another time he would like call me names and stuff soap in my mouth. And I would go to school with soap in my mouth and I was rinsing it in the bathroom. And I remember this time because as I'm rinsing it, the studs were coming out. And I was in kindergarten, the other kids were like laughing. These little girls were laughing at me. And I think that's when I first like felt rage and anger about the situation. And I started fighting them. And I became very angry. And that was like the beginning of that. And then his abuse turned sexual, where he would sit me on his lap while he was nude. And all this is happening with my brother in the bed and my mom sometimes in the other side of the room, the same room. So I don't know how she didn't know or she was so high or didn't want to know, but this was all going on. And all throughout this, I remember thinking, it's not me. It's something wrong with him. I don't know if it was like a voice I was hearing. Another way I would cope, I remember like when he would sit me on his lap and do these things to me, I would just imagine myself blacking out and imagine everything going dark so I can just be somewhere else, somewhere safe and somewhere not witnessing, not feeling what was going on. And later on, I thought that was something everyone could do. I don't know if it's something like so bizarre, but I was only 5. And I was able to, on command, I say, okay, I can't. And it would just turn black. And it was a lot of periods, blocks of that time while that was going on that I just don't recall it. I don't remember, I don't feel it, anything. And that's just one of the ways that we cope, that we survive. I think that's a technique that we just instinctively know how to do. I don't know if you experience anything like that, how
Yeah,
you like.
absolutely. You know, as little children, I think we don't have the coping skills, right? We're so little, we don't know how to handle certain situations. And I've shared with you prior to the show that I've, experienced sexual abuse as a little girl as well. And I don't remember. There are parts that I just also blacked out. I don't, especially for those events that occurred before the age of 5. So, when you moved in with your grandma, how old were you about?
I believe we were born. No, I was living with my mom and dad for my first few years. I don't
Hmm.
obviously don't remember that, but from my earliest memories, we were living with our grandmother because our parents had split up and my mom didn't have anywhere to live.
So
She
your
had a
first memory of a family is grandma.
right, right. And my brother and grandma, what we call her abuela, she always had a house filled with people, with kids, and it just felt very safe. It was a very loving environment, although there was a lot of poverty, and her children were addicted to drugs. She was very young, by the way. She started off young, and she died in her 40s, and I didn't really realize how much she was dealing with at such a young age, and didn't even get to live that long.
Yeah,
But
that's a very young age. But at
mhm,
least you got to experience that little part that you remember and still cherish, that you had that space with grandma that felt really safe and loving.
that, and when I went with my aunt, her youngest child,
Hmm.
uh, her and her husband, she couldn't have children, and her husband took me in. And I think I remember, though I was a little older, this was before the abuse, and I remember going to Disney, having my own room, and just a regular childhood, just being very loved on and taken care of. So I would say that was more so because I could remember that more.
And you felt like a parental love, like, from
Yes.
a mother's perspective and also a father's perspective. So that, in a way, when you did experience those traumatic events, in a way, you were able to tell yourself as a child, hey, this doesn't feel right because I know what love feels like, and this doesn't feel like what I've experienced before. Do you think that that's probably what went through your mind as that little girl?
You can see that. Yeah, because I didn't really have that much time with my sister's father to feel that personal, like he knew me, or when it's someone you really love and they put you down, it feels real, it feels true. Even
Right.
though as an adult, a kid tends to believe them because they're adult, but he would say these mean things, and I remember like not really absorbing it and thinking. I knew it was just him, something wrong with him. I remember sitting on the toilet and the lights were outside the bathroom, which is weird. The switch was like right outside the door, and he turned it off while I was in there. And he was like scratching the door and making these animal sounds and trying to scare me. And I think part of me, that defiance, that little fire that I have naturally, my personality, I just was like, I'm not going to get scared. I know it's him. It's not a bear. It's not whoever Freddy Krueger, whoever he's trying to be. I know it's him, and I refuse to be afraid. And when I came out the bathroom, I just looked at him, like rolled my eyes, and like he's a fool. I mean, obviously, I was scared at parts, and I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. There's the whole guilt with that, you know. And we did get help. The school intervened at some point and decided like something's going on. They were suspected something, and it was true.
So at
And I
what point, like what happened that led to that for the school to finally see there was something going on?
believe it was that fight
When
when.
he threw the boot at you and
But the black eye didn't help, but I think it was when I had all the soap, because what happened was I was trying to rinse the soap out in the sink, and when everyone was washing their hands at the bathroom, and when they saw that, then I fought the girls um when they were making fun of me. And I think the teachers like, you know, what's going on? And they asked me, and I said, he put soap in my mouth. And that was it. The cops came and they took my brother and I.
And then where did you go from there? Did they put you in a home or a
Oh,
family, or
I
because
went
that could
out.
be a whole other experience that can be very traumatizing as well.
It can be, and I almost wish that I went to strangers or home because the family I have, since it was in the same community, same environment, they want drugs. They were also not able to take care of me. My aunt, she had 4 children. I went with her. Another aunt, my father's sister, and she was on drugs. Her husband was on drugs. It was a 1 bedroom apartment. Uh, we suffered a lot from hunger, experienced that in the room. They would lock us in the room. The lock was outside the door. And while they were getting high, we just stay in the room. And I remember passing out from hunger. And although we had each other, and there wasn't like that type of abuse, you know, they did the best they can. And eventually they did get clean. Um, but I went from family member to family member. And I did end up in a group home at 11 for 3 years. So it was a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and how was that experience? Let's say for somebody that's another child that's going through this and, going from home to home, not really having a stable home, not having, their parents that should be taking care of them. And now you're um being bounced around by the system, right, from one place to another. How did you deal with that as a young girl?
There was definitely a lot of anger and bitterness. And I think in later years, it mostly affected me. It mostly made things worse. I wish I would have appreciated the system as far as the group home. And I remember being so angry with the counselor there who was only trying to help, not appreciating that because I think a lot of me felt undeserving of it and didn't know how to, okay, you don't have to fight anymore. You could be happy. You could take advantage of. They had a lot of programs that I didn't take advantage of. They put me in Catholic school. I got kicked out 2 weeks later. And that was free. It was a really good school. And I would maybe had more opportunities as far as that. I was always good in school with grades. I always was smart, but not consistent with what was going on. I think I was like lashing out. And I see that a lot with teenagers, especially. Um, Even when they don't have these type of experiences, they still have all those emotions and don't know how to deal with them. And I wish I would have just, if I could talk to myself, I would tell myself it's not forever, like what happened and what's going on and this instability. It felt like it was forever, but it's just a short period of time.
It does
Although,
feel like forever. I do remember going through, those moments where you feel like you're in it and there's no way out. Like you feel like you're trapped, right? In that bubble of pain, of anger, all these emotions that surround you. But I do remember, for you, you had that sense of protecting yourself and putting yourself in a cocoon. For me, I had the sense that at some point in my life, you know, I was going to get out of it. And that gave me hope. So that's what kept me going and fighting my emotions. I had that hope that I can overcome all of this at some time in the future and be normal, like a normal person. At the time, I felt like I wasn't normal. I wanted to be normal like everybody else, be happy, have all these happy emotions, and not be restricted by my own emotions. So did you have something that, kind of motivated you just to keep going, to keep fighting? Was there like something that within you that gave you hope?
I think I always believed that it was all for something. I was going through this for a reason, that it will all make sense one day. It was more spiritual for me. As far as growing up the way I did, it wasn't just me going through this. That was my experience, but everywhere around me was everyone was just dramatic, addicted to drugs, unstable homes. Everyone I pretty much knew, all my family members, has somewhat similar story to what I'm saying. And it just it seemed like I didn't want to live like that anymore. I didn't want to be like them. I didn't know what normal looked like. Like I didn't have that to compare to from what I was surrounded by. What helped me was books. I read a lot, and I think I was looking for answers and stories. And that's why I like to write now. And that's why I want to write my memoir, um, words, and knowing that I saw different worlds. I saw how things could be different through books.
That's wonderful. I know, in my own experience, I know my mom, that was one of her things. She gravitated as she went through, um, because she was in this marriage with a very narcissistic person who was very abusive. That was her go-to, the reading into that imaginary space, because books bring you to these magical spaces that you can just see yourself and imagine yourself being in those stories, and kind of takes you out of the reality that you're in and puts you in a different reality, and it puts you in a different storyline.
Exactly. And that's what helped me during my childhood mostly. And then I found nonfiction books as when I met my husband, actually, because I used to read all these fiction books, and he's a reader as well. And I started getting into the whole self help and more spiritual. I found like Esther Hicks and the Law of Attraction and all those wonderful things. And it was just like, whoa, like it was just such a
Life
good connection.
changing.
Yes, yes. And I think that really propelled my journey.
So before we get to that journey of yours of overcoming, this childhood trauma, like how was your life like, once you became an adult, once you hit 18, once your awareness as an adult? Because I know for me, once I became more aware, self-aware of who I was as an adult, of my body, it kind of hit me even harder than as a child, because then I could really understand what had happened to me. Because as children, we don't understand what's happening. We can't process the extent of the trauma that we're experiencing. Um, and as we become, or we go through our teenage years and going through our journey becoming adults, and we gain better understanding of what we are, of our bodies, and how things should be. It kind of hits you all of a sudden, like, oh my God, the extent of what I experienced. And how did you have that revelation, or did you always know?
So for me, it was, you know, when you're in survival mode and you just from fifth when I left the group home, I was on my own. I was 15, and I had to figure out where I'm gonna live, how I'm gonna eat, dress myself, all those type of things. And so I made some really well. I was 15, so the mistakes were stupid now, but back then it was just to get by. I think once you're out of that survival mode of the bare necessities that you need to live, then you can explore, okay, what do I want to do with my life? I know I wanted to go to college, so I went and got my associates. I went to a community college. I was renting a room. I was working in a daycare center and a supermarket, and I eventually got a car, which was like such a huge thing. It was like, whoa, I did this. I met someone, and I feel like we always get these people who come into our life to really help us in any small way. And I met someone when I was working in the supermarket who was much older than me, and I thought he had a crush on me. And I was like, look, I don't like you. I have a boyfriend and all this acting uppity. And he's like, no, I just think you need some help. I don't think you belong here. Give me your resume. and I'm gonna give it to the HR department in my job. And he did. And he didn't want anything from me, which, is very rare. And I ended up finding a good job where he worked. And I worked there for like 8 years. And it was one of the best times. That really put me on my feet, gave me that stable home. I was able to buy the car. I was able to finish my associates and all those good things and live a normal life. And I was in like my mid-20s. So yeah.
That's wonderful, and I do really agree with you. I do believe that the universe do statistically, strategically puts individuals in our path to help
Yes.
us along with the path, so that we go to the right path that we're supposed to go on. And I guess that was normal, right? Because everybody had been taking advantage of you, abusing you. So for you, you thought, well, there must be something he wants in return. But
Yes.
really, he was just there to to be kind of a little guardian angel and help you along the way. And I certainly have crossed, paths with individuals like that throughout my life that really helped me in the right direction. But I also had a lot of individuals I was trying to seek help that really didn't really offer much help. They just kind of felt sorry for my situation. Did you ever like try to seek help of, dealing with your emotions at that time as you were, in your early 20s before you discovered these books? Or were you still just trying to kind of get through survival mode of, trying to get to the next thing?
I did try therapy twice, and it was like that. I mean, I remember the therapist was actually a nun, and it was funny because I was in the group home. It was run by nuns. I used to always joke that I'm going to be a nun, but the therapist, she just felt sorry for me, and it felt unhelpful. It made me feel more like a victim, powerless, and I was seeking a way to around that, a way to like put it behind me, a way to heal and find my own power and strength and find the reason why it was happening. Like, because I always thought there was a reason. So I'm like, help me see what this reason is. Not, wow, that's a lot. And like, the more I spoke and the more I shared, it felt like she should have not been a therapist.
She
So
didn't really have the tools to really get you, to overcome those things. It was just
yeah,
more,
she was
yeah.
very nice. But so then I tried someone else, and he was talking about himself. So I think it's definitely finding the right therapist, right?
Mhm.
And finding the right maybe someone specialized in childhood trauma or having experience with that, or having not just started, maybe they just started, I don't know where they were, but that was the only 2 times, and I was turned off from it. And then I journaled a lot. I've journaled since I could probably write, and I still have most of them. And that was my way. And then I would reread them, and sometimes I would find answers within those journals, within my own writing. Sometimes it felt like I was trying to give myself what I needed in love and positivity, and okay, you're gonna get through this, and little pep talks when I would reread those things, what I was going through. And that's how I dealt with that.
Now, how did that affect your relationship? So as you were dating and, having this traumatic experience, with another male and being in these environments, how did that affect your relationships?
Um, well, the first relationship when I was 15 and I didn't have anywhere to live, uh, I ended up with a man who was 27, and he was a drug dealer, and he had apartments where he was selling drugs out of, and he said I can stay in one of them. And so I stood there, and he cheated on me, and I called my best friend, and she came and got me, and that's when she took me home with her, and I lived with her and her family, and her mom was also on drugs, but she had 6 children, and She took me in, and she was just very functioning at it. Like she still, took care of her children and things like that. And I was just grateful for her taking me in, to be honest. But so I had that relationship, and then the next one was basically they cheated on me. It was just like I thought all men just cheated. I always had that in my mind. I didn't expect them to be faithful at all. Um, I wouldn't even say I was faithful. Once they cheated on me, I would cheat. It was just like I didn't even know what relationships really were. They cared about me and they would help me in my situations. But and it was so caring, and I feel like they were just kind of like one of those people who probably was there to help me and love me for that moment, but not as long as I stayed in it. And if I had a healthier mind and a better support system, I probably would have saw that earlier. But I stayed in it way too long, and that I think until I met my husband, I didn't know what a good man was, and this was already my late 20s. So yeah, um,
Did you ever feel like rejected, like there's something wrong with me? This is why this is all happening to me, or any of those things? Like, what was your thought process as you're going through this?
there was times where I felt like they wouldn't be doing this if I had family, someone to step and say this. Like, I was 15, he was 27. If I had parents that hopefully would not, like my children, I would never accept that for my daughter. So it was just a lack of protection. But I always felt unprotected. I always felt like I had to do it myself. And that was the decision. I said I'd rather make these decisions. At least if I'm affected by it, it's my decision and not someone else doing this to me. And that was me trying to find my power and control.
Of course. So now tell us about, once you discovered these books and you started discovering, there's this whole other um way that I can deal with his emotions. So tell me about the books that really introduced you to your healing journey that got you to where you are today.
I was living with my roommate. I had a roommate in college, and she told me about The Secret. And she's like, "You have to read this book. You have to read this book." And I guess I wasn't ready. I believe that everything happens when you're ready for it and when you could really utilize it and make the most of it. So at that time, when she told me about The Secret, didn't pay attention to it. And I ended up meeting my husband. He used to get the movies from Netflix mailed to your house. And this is how long we've been together. And he ended up getting The Secret. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. My, ex roommate told me about that. I watched it, and that's what really changed my perspective, my beliefs. It just shook my world. It was just like, okay, I want to know more. And I started following Esther Hicks, Wayne Dyer, and all the Louise Hay House,
Hmm.
all of them, and it was just beautiful. It was that was the control. I always felt like, how can I? There has to be something I can do to make this better. And it was my thoughts. It was my attitude. I started learning the things that were detrimental and how I can change my world and how it doesn't, I can create it the way I want it to be.
That's beautiful. And what kind of, besides the books, what else did you try that really helped you, get it on the right track of healing and coming to um being, this beautiful human that you are today, that got you on this journey now of telling your story? What else did you, what other means did you seek to help you with this journey?
So at first, I always was seeking God. I was
Mm-hmm.
always seeking religion. I started going to church every Sunday and trying to read the Bible, and it wasn't sticking. I didn't have that feeling like when I watched The Secret.
But were
I
you religious growing up as, as a young girl, or and with any of the families that you grew up with? Was
Uh,
anybody
I
religious?
There wasn't religion really. There was always baptism. It's really weird because it was like a big thing to baptize the babies. That was definitely in our culture. And then there was never church unless it was a funeral. Very few people got married. Um, so there was no going to church even for weddings. It was just a funeral. And there was plenty of that. But as far as church, no, there was no church growing up. But then when I got into my early 20s, I started seeking out church. And I started realizing everywhere I was living, there was a church like across the street or very nearby. I could hear the bells and everything. I'm like, hey, I'm always looking for signs too. So I started, okay, there's a sign. I should start going to church. And so I started trying to go to church. Even when I had my family, my children, I would take my husband, my kids, even against their will. They did not want to go. And I found a very lovely church. The music was great. The people were great. What I'm saying is that I started wanting that intuition and that feeling within that this is for me. I'm not saying for other people it's not a great thing. And I really believe in God and that, but not religion. I just didn't like the feeling of when the negativity, right? And this just the way they portrayed God as a jealous God and all those other, it just didn't sit with me. So I didn't feel connected with that. And I think a lot of people are starting to feel like that because I've had
Hmm.
conversations with people. So I just stopped going and I started looking more, reading more, and meditating. That was a big thing, meditating every day for 20 minutes in the morning. And I started doing it at night now in a positivity journal that I keep with gratitude, and I write everything I'm grateful for, my affirmations, and then at night, and that really helps me stay. It really helps my state of mind and everything stay more positive and controlling my thoughts. You can't control them, but like trying to keep track of how I'm feeling, and then I know what I'm. Okay, I need to change this up. I need to switch this up, change my perspective. So that helped a lot.
That's beautiful. Now, what age did you start doing like the meditation? Was that like early back in your 20s? Was that like a little bit later on
After
in your
I had my
life?
daughter, and we were talking about that when you was sharing with your daughter and the energy, and I love that. And I've been
Yes.
thinking about that since then, and I think that is so true. I could really connect with that because once I was pregnant with my daughter, I feel like there was a switch that just turned on and everything. I just wanted to improve and be a better me, and that's when I really started seeking things. And I saw The Secret, and I started meditating and journaling more. But my journals changed. It was more about being grateful and caring about how I feel versus and being able to track it was really the problem. I think a lot of times I was so used to being angry and hurt, not knowing that it was something that happened so many years ago. Like, what is going on right now that has me angry or hurt or scared? What is it right now? I will sometimes be feeling like that, and I have to connect it with. It's not from right now. It's not my life. I don't have to feel like this right now. I don't have to be feeling defensive or just always angry. I can let that go. So working through it with that.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And once we start, and it's a wonderful practice to do that because then you realize you become consciously aware that, the anger, like you might snap at your child and you don't know why you're angry. And it may be that the child did something that kind of reminded you unconsciously of an event that goes back years, and now you portray this angry reaction. You're like, why am I getting angry? There's no reason for me to get so angry. But when you journal that, it opens up the opportunity for you to reflect back where that's coming from, and then you realize, oh my god, it had nothing to do with my child. She just did something innocent. Oh my god, that reminded me of when I was 5, and this is why I'm angry. And I don't have to, portray this anger from when I was 5 to my child. It's not her fault that I am still carrying that anger from when I was 5 years old. And that gives you the opportunity to let that go. Now, one of the things that I found was actually forgiving the people that really hurt me. That was a very hard thing to do, but I knew, and forgiveness is not about, letting the people off the hook. It's about forgiving yourself for holding on to that pain for so long, for allowing that pain to continue. And I had to do it. And I did it when I was 18. I had to forgive a specific person because I knew if I wouldn't do it, I don't think I would be here today because I was holding on to that pain. And I understood that, okay, I have to forgive and let go if I want to continue to live and continue to fight. Did you at any point go through that process of forgiveness, of letting go, understanding that, these people were hurting themselves? They were going through their own struggles.
A lot of me would say that, like, my mom always used to tell, whenever I would see her on weekends here and there and had time with her, she would tell me about her childhood and growing up. And I felt really bad. I mean, she had a very traumatic life. And so it gave me understanding, but like you said, it doesn't let go. Like, you're still my mom, you should still protect me. And that's why when I had my daughter, my main thing was like protecting her and being there for her and being the mom I am because of what I went through. So I did not feel as much anger towards her, but before she died, she had asked to see me. And I said no. And the thing is, I guess I wanted to hurt her. I wanted her to know that I was angry. And by me not going, because normally I would always look for her, she never looked for me growing up. I would literally go to drug dealers on the corner, like, do you know this woman? And describe my mom. And that's how I would find her wherever she was. And so she never looked for me. So now she's asking for me, and I wanted to, like, be angry and say no, but I didn't know she was gonna die. She was in her 40s as well. So I don't, I always thought she would live long. You don't never know when someone's time is gonna go. And so that is a big regret of mine that I wish I would have. I heard they told me that she was clean. I've never known or seen her clean. So that would have been a great experience. And maybe I could have had a conversation that I never had. So I did write her a letter, and that was for myself. And that was my way of forgiving her and forgiving myself for not having that moment and that regret. And obviously she's gone. So, but it was just some kind of therapy for me. And that was one of the exercises I did. So I just said everything I ever wanted to say to her and let her know that I know she made the best choices she could make. And I am who I am because of that. As far as my sister's father, um, she made me forgive him. He apologized to me when I was like 11. She brought him to me one of the weekends I was with her, and I hadn't seen him since the incident. So here he is standing in front of me, and she's like, "You need to forgive him." And he's like, "I'm sorry for what I did." And I'm just looking at both of them, not really able to process it. And I said, "Okay, I forgive you." But in my heart, I wanted to forgive him because I don't want it. I don't want to keep walking with it. I don't want to keep it affecting me. I don't want to keep being sad or reliving that moment anytime I think about it or talk about it. Like, the fact that I could talk about it right now without crying is such a huge thing, because every time you cry, it's like you dare again.
Yeah. How the emotions come up, you're reliving that experience and that pain, but it's also healing. Crying is necessary, right? Because it's a way of letting our emotions express themselves instead of
And I don't
holding
mean
them in.
crying like that. I mean crying like holding on to it in a victim state for
Hmm.
comfort. Sometimes it could be comforting. Sometimes it feels like you're owed something, and
Right.
I want to release it so that I can enjoy life and enjoy my full potential and what I'm here for.
Absolutely. So, Josie, what do you right now? What is your mission right now? You're sharing your story. I know you want people to understand that even though you've gone through all, same experiences as you, or maybe not as much, that there's hope. So tell us about, the journey that you're in right now.
I think anyone who's alive has gone through something, and pain is pain. So
Mhm.
there's not as much or as little. Anyone who's hurting or struggling in life, which is everyone, is should know. And my message I want to share, and why I'm writing my memoir and sharing this story, because I never talked about it before. So this is really weird. But since I'm writing my memoir, I'm like, I want people to know that what we need is within us already. We have that strength. We have it's those coping mechanisms. No one taught us that. When we need it, it just shows up. But being able to, whatever practice you want, whatever faith, religion, for me it was meditation, being able to make yourself aware and sensitive enough to pick up on it, because it's always around. Like listening to your thoughts, your intuition, and what you need. And it's only for a small period. It's not forever, like they say. And this too shall pass. It will. So you have the choice to decide how you're gonna react to things, how you want it to affect you, and how you want to turn it around to make the best of it.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Josie, for coming on and sharing your story with everybody. And giving hope. There's a hope. If we could
Always
hold
hope.
on to that belief that, someday, sometimes it may be very close in the future. Sometimes it may be a little distant in the future. But if you could hold on to that hope that it's not always going to be this dark, this painful, that you have the power to change it all around and live a wonderful life despite of whatever you're going through. Um, just hold on to that. There's nowadays, I know back when I was growing up, and probably you as well, as teenagers, we didn't have the internet like we have now. There weren't
Yeah,
as much information or resources for us to get a handle of and finding help as easily as it is now. Nowadays, there's just so much help out there. Um, there's so many, YouTube has so much amazing videos and meditations and just wonderful information that you can get a hold of that can help you just get through this with even if you don't have the money or the resources. There's a ton of stuff that you can still get your hands on that can help you get to the next step, right? Get you to the next, even if it's just journaling like you did. That's extremely helpful. Or getting yourself a book just like you did, just getting into the library. All it takes is one thing where you get in front of one thing that can change your perspective or change the way to look at things. For me, um, was my daughter. She changed my whole perspective. Um, and also, having my husband who was struggling with severe depression, who didn't believe in medication, that kind of pushed me to find, okay, I have to figure this out. What ways can I help him? And I'm still struggling with my childhood trauma. How can I help myself? Finally get over this. But it was her that kind of pushed me in a way of finding, um, like you, these wonderful teachings that brought me to the journey that I'm on. And also now sharing these stories with the world and bringing these stories so that people can take inspiration from these stories and find ways and find hope that they can change their lives around. Their reality doesn't have to be that reality forever. You can change that reality.
exactly. That's a blessing, what you're doing. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Josie, for coming on and sharing your story. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening to the podcast. Please make sure you subscribe, like, and please share. And thank you, and see you next week for another wonderful story. Thank you so much.